Good evening, I'm Shawn Yao.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And standing in for Ces Oreña-Drilon, I'm Gao. The big stories tonight. Without saying exactly how it will be done, President Marcos says Zaldy Co will be back in the Philippines soon. Meantime, skeptics wonder if there are photographs to show the former lawmaker arrested and in police custody in the Czech Republic.
The confidential funds issue continues to haunt Vice President Sara Duterte. The Commission on Audit wants her office to return another 375 million pesos of it for violation of spending rules.
And the United States and Iran square off in the Strait of Hormuz yet again as gaps remain on peace talks in the Gulf. With that, fears of a deeper global oil shock linger.
Nananatili po siya sa kustodiya ng Czech Republic at isinasagawa natin ang lahat ng mga kinakailangang hakbang para sa kanyang pagbalik dito sa Pilipinas. Ang ganitong mga proseso ay may sinusunod na mga legal na hakbang. We will bring Zaldy Co home and we will do so in accordance with the law. He will answer to the Filipino people.
A high-level coordination team is set to head for the Czech Republic to seek the deportation of fugitive Zaldy Co.
President Bongbong Marcos himself made the announcement, insisting that Co will be brought home to face the charges against him.
The chief executive also denied allegations that Co has not been arrested. Here is mobile journalist Julie Baiza with tonight's big story.
President Marcos himself is certain fugitive ex-lawmaker Zaldy Co will soon be brought home and will answer for his alleged involvement in the flood control scandal. This is the third time Marcos gave an update on Co, who is said to have been, quote, arrested in the Czech Republic on travel document-related issues. The president insists Co is currently detained in a European country and that he has instructed the Department of Foreign Affairs and other agencies to work at bringing him home as soon as possible. A high-level coordination team, he said, will be sent for this mission.
Ang ganitong mga proseso ay may sinusunod na mga legal na hakbang sa pagitan ng mga bansa. Kaya't nangangailangan na sapat na panahon upang maisagawa ng tama. We will bring Zaldy Co home and we will do so in accordance with the law. He will answer to the Filipino people.
So far, though, there has been no proof of Zaldy Co in custody in Prague. And in the absence of any visual proof, there are those who continue to cast doubt on the information that Marcos has given, one of whom is former Duterte presidential spokesperson Harry Roque.
Lahat ng sinabi ng Presidente Marcos Jr. aka bangag tungkol kay Zaldy Co ay fake news. Kumpirmado po, hindi siya naaresto. Kumpirmado po, hindi nakadetena si Zaldy. Kumpirmado po, ligtas si Zaldy Co.
In his Facebook post, Roque insisted that no Filipino had been arrested in Prague. He claims to have confirmed this through immigration officials in the European city. Surprisingly, the palace has not rebutted Roque's claim. International law expert attorney Ralph Sarmiento says if Co was indeed arrested for a border immigration issue, his case will likely be under the jurisdiction of the Czech Republic's Justice Department. As such, the Philippine government must act fast to ensure Co's deportation.
So hindi tayo pwede mag-request ng extradition. Or kung magre-request naman tayo ng extradition, it will be denied, but prerogative din ng Czech Republic na mag-deport ng tao. So it can be subject to a diplomatic negotiation between the two states. I think yung diplomatic negotiation lang talaga, yung pinaka-fastest and most effective na route or remedy na pwedeng i-take ng Philippine government.
Sarmiento says that aside from a red notice from the International Criminal Police Organization, or Interpol, the Philippines may also invoke the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, or UNAC. Both the Philippines and the Czech Republic are members. Under the UNAC, member states are required to assist one another in the capture of persons wanted for corruption cases. Zaldy Co is currently facing graft and malversation raps. There could be one problem if this intervention is sought against Co, though.
So kung mag-file sa ng asylum, yun, it will again further complicate the matter. Pero kung makakauna yung diplomatic negotiation, and then fruitful yung diplomatic negotiation na hindi pa naka-move forward if ever na magplano siya ng application for asylum.
Whatever Zaldy Co's status is, government efforts continue to bring him back to the Philippines. The PNP is now also coordinating with their counterparts in Europe. The PNP will be the agency tasked to receive Co and process him before being turned over to the Sandigan Bayan, the court which issued the warrant of his arrest.
Magiging transparent ang Philippine National Police magmula sa araw na dumating dito sa Pilipinas ang nasabing dating congressman at sa panahon na sa kanyang pagdating dito sa Camp Crame, pagpuproseso sa kanyang medical, physical examination at hanggang sa may return yung warrant sa Sandigan Bayan.
Kapatid Mobile Journal Julie Baiza, We're One News.
And in other news, Vice President Sara Duterte has been ordered to return 448 million pesos in confidential funds. The Commission on Audit has issued a notice of disallowance against VP Duterte, mandating the return of 375 million pesos in confidential funds issued in 2023. Now, this is on top of 73.28 million it earlier disallowed for the year 2022. Among COA's reasons for the money's return was the improper disbursement of funding on the part of former Special Disbursing Officer Gina Acosta to the head of the Vice President's Security and Protection Group, Colonel Raymond Dante La Chica. The auditing body also noted discrepancies in the use of the cash advances for reimbursement, indicating that provisions under COA's joint circular prohibited the use of such payments for its purposes. Aside from Duterte, Acosta, and La Chica, along with former COA Chief Accountant Julieta Villa del Rey, were touted as liable and responsible for returning the confidential funds. COA noted that the settlement of funds should be conducted immediately and that the lack of appeal on the part of the individuals within a period of 6 months warranted the said decision as final and executory. The House Committee on Justice believes this COA decision supports the allegations of misuse of confidential funds by VP Sara. The impeachment hearing will continue on Wednesday, April 22. Next to be scrutinized is the Vice President's alleged unexplained wealth.
And as far as the COA is concerned, ang position ng COA still is the rules under the Joint Circular number 2015-01 was violated as well. And I believe that these are significant, at least for the purpose of determination of probable cause.
So, ito pong bagong notice of disallowance po na ito ay magagamit bilang pagpapalakas sa kaso po ng atin pong impeachment case laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte on betrayal of public trust over confidential funds misuse.
And as the next installment of the impeachment hearings against Vice President Sara Duterte draws near, the House Justice Committee has laid out the next steps in the upcoming proceedings, including what will be tackled and who will appear. Speaking to our sister program Storycon, House Justice Committee Chair Jervil Luistro said it is too early to determine whether probable cause exists. This as key allegations, including Duterte's alleged unexplained wealth, non-disclosure of the Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth or SALN, and kill threats are still being established. The panel is set to hold a hearing on April 22 to determine probable cause, and Congresswoman Luistro outlined who are expected to appear.
One is the Ombudsman, and of course we expect them to present the SALN of the Vice President. Second is the AMLC, the Anti-Money Laundering Council, and we mentioned this during the last hearing that we are requiring them to bring the report on covered transactions and suspicious transactions, including the investigations that they conducted regarding the same, This is with respect to the Vice President and the husband. Third, we will be having also the BIR, and we anticipate that they will be presenting the income tax return. We'll be having as well the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is for the general information sheets and the audited financial statements of the declared business establishments of the spouses. And the fifth, of course, this is upon the motion of Congresswoman Laila De Lima, is former Senator Sonny Trillanes, whom we anticipate will be testifying also on the allegation of unexplained wealth and non-disclosure in the SALN.
Meanwhile, Congresswoman Luistro clarified that the panel has not subpoenaed the vice president's bank records, but instead has asked the Anti-Money Laundering Council for reports on suspicious and covert transactions. She cited specific issues that will be taken up in the upcoming hearings.
For Wednesday, this will be focused on unexplained wealth and non-disclosure in the SALN. The 29th hearing is intended to discuss the allegations of threat, no? So if there will be no move from the part of the majority members to fix additional hearing dates, then by 29, we should be ready to vote in the committee. Hindi pa natin nalatag yung evidence with respect to the second and the third offense.
Correct.
The second will be the unexplained wealth and the non-disclosure in the SALN. And then the third will be the threat. So I think it is important for the justice members to see first whether the evidence, including the allegations in the complaint, are sufficient for them to say that probable cause exists.
And still on the vice president, senators are now preparing for the possibility that her ouster case will soon reach them as an impeachment court. Senate President Tito Sotto says he has initiated discussions with members of the majority bloc as a heads up on the possible transmission of the articles of impeachment from the lower chamber. He says senators must be ready to act as judges. Sotto adds that he is personally reviewing court rules to prepare for any scenario. The Senate President says he met with some majority senators last week, but clarifies it was an informal gathering, not a caucus or official meeting. Among those present were Senators Ping Lacson, Sherwin Gatchalian, and J.B. Ejercito. They also discussed consulting lawyers and former Supreme Court justices to help guide them through the impeachment process. For his part, Senator Erwin Tulfo says senators should be prepared not just legally but also physically. He adds his team is now reviewing the charges, possible witnesses, and the defense of Duterte's camp. Meanwhile, Lacson proposed holding trials on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3 p.m. with committee work in the mornings and plenary sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He says this will keep legislative work on track while giving senator judges time to review the case. So far, the minority bloc has yet to issue a statement, but Lacson notes the possibility that Rodante Marcoleta may question the basis for the impeachment.
Now you're still watching The Big Story. Coming up are a couple of surveys. One showing gain for President Marcos and a slight decline for Vice President Sara Duterte when it comes to performance ratings. And then there's the presidential preference for 2028 coming out soon, and it has some surprises. The details when we return. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to The Big Story. A recent Octo survey showed improved public sentiment for President Bongbong Marcos with higher trust and performance ratings. Marcos's trust rating rose to 54% for the first quarter of 2026, up 6 points from the previous quarter. His performance rating also increased to 55%. Meantime, VP Sara Duterte maintained majority trust at 55%. Her performance rating, however, declined by 4 percentage points to 50%. The poll was conducted from March 19 to 25, notably the first week of the Iran-US war. 1,200 respondents participated with a plus-minus 3% margin of error. It marked a significant jump in Marcos's ratings, which suffered a record decline in December. And while Duterte's numbers are statistically the same, it is notable how, for the first time in several months, her performance rating has slipped. Octa observed ambivalence towards Duterte slowly creeping up, as well as sustained distrust and dissatisfaction in Balance Luzon and in Metro Manila. On Storycon this afternoon, Octa Research also shared a glimpse of the presidential preferences. It showed Duterte still on top, but no longer trailing behind is her predecessor and now Naga City Mayor Leni Robredo. Rounding up the top five are Senators Rafi Tulfo, who previously placed second, Mayor Isko Moreno, and Senator Bam Aquino. The full results will be released on Wednesday, April 22.
Kay VP Duterte, actually, she went down, less about 4 or 5 points from her last highest. No, so Mayor Leni pala, she went up. These are not predictive of anything. These are all preliminary. But yun nga, the trend, as Sec Ronald was saying, is that the trend is that it's narrowing. That the Vice President's base is also, in a sense, consolidated, but it's reaching a certain limit also. But one candidate seemed to have resonated in the first quarter and moved up in the rankings very quickly. So that's Mayor Leni Robredo.
And now in other news, one scientist is emphasizing the need for people-centric mobility. Civil engineer Cyrus Gomari has worked with the LGUs of Pasig, Taguig, and Quezon City to deploy CIRMO. This is an AI platform cities can use to collect and analyze mobility data. CIRMO has found that only 23% of the roads are catering to pedestrians, while 77% are being used by vehicles. LGUs find CIRMO helpful in designing their urban mobility plans by tracking people's behavior and mobility-related choices.
And tonight, we are counting people, not cars. With us is Dr. Cyrus Gomari himself. Dr. Gomari, good evening. Welcome to The Big Story.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Okay, what can you
All
tell
right,
us
great.
about CIRMO? We understand that you have been brought home from Germany as part of the DOST's Balik Scientist program. Tell us about AI analytics and data being used to solve traffic issues.
Yeah, so in CIRMO, specifically, the problem we're addressing is yung kabagalan sa planning, no? I mean, I think maybe you guys also know a few people who are urban planners or have created plans for cities. Pero yung majority of the issue is always none of these plans actually get implemented, right? We have tons of plans every year. Or every 3 terms, so every election cycle, may bagong plano na naman. But none of it gets implemented. So in CIRMO, using AI and tech, essentially, we speed up that process. So we make it much faster for the LGUs. We make it data-driven. Dapat may evidence no, sa mga decision na ginagawa natin. And more importantly, all of those get translated into actions. Things that an LGU can actually implement. Hindi yung sasabihin natin, just rebuild your entire city, which typically yung mga traditional plans, yun yung ending nun. That's the end recommendation. And with CIRMO, we're trying to get closer to reality lang. Kung anong kaya ma-implement ng isang LGU in the next 3 to 6 months, ganyan, 1 year, 2 years, and so on.
Siguro, Dr. Cyrus, let's start with the use case. Maybe indicate one city that is using it and how it has helped the LGU plan mobility better. Para lang maintindihan natin.
Sige. Yung, ito one concrete example. This was during my Balik Scientist stint with Quezon City. There was this incident there was a road crash incident that Mayor requested us to create a study for. Typically, yung study na yun, yung road crash, comprehensive road crash report or comprehensive road safety audit of that specific area we looked at. Typically, umabot siya ng 6 months. No? But with the use of CIRMO, it took us 2 days to generate that output. So yung, at least yung part about planning, about what's actually needed, anong kayang i-execute, we generated that very fast. Pero of course, the implementation, I'm not part of the government, di ko naman kaya implement yun. That's nasa side ng LGU yun. Another example is in Naga City, we've done also some smaller studies. We've given out recommendations in a very short span of time. So instead na nagsasayang ng 1 taon, 2 taon para sa plano, ngayon, nandun na sila sa stage na naghahanap na sila ng funds for the implementation. In Pasig as well, we've crafted their transport master plan. There are quite a few different initiatives in Pasig which most likely sa second half ng this year and next year may implement on the ground. Medyo magkakaiba yung mga recommendations sa amin sa bawat lugar. And even in Rojas City actually, Rojas City Capiz, we've also recommended changes dun sa main avenue nila based on the data we've collected on the ground. And sila din, nandun na sila sa funding stages.
Doc, sorry, medyo text slow mo ako ng konti eh. In layman's terms,
sige.
what kind of information will CIMO give us? Well, not us actually, the LGUs, and how do they transform this into something that they will use? In layman's terms.
Sige, yung actually basically ito na lang. Kasi ang hindi tayo kulang ngayon sa suggestions na binibigay ng mga tao whether it comes from an expert or some group. Di tayo kulang diyan. Sobrang dami nagbibigay ng recommendation, kala nila ito yung tama, ito yung tama. Pero majority sa kanila hindi talaga ina-assess ano yung situation on the ground. So kung hindi natin naintindihan ano ba yung problema, like hindi natin naintindihan, like tulad nung binanggit niya sa opening na to na 23% is of the space is used by public transport and walkers, and 73% of the space is used just for cars. Like yung quantification na yun, binibigyan lang natin ng number, simula pa lang yun. So dun pa lang, kung ma-identify lang natin ng tama yung problema, tsaka lang tayo makakapunta sa solution, no? Kaya yung paulit-ulit na ginagawang road widening, kunwari, ang dami natin road widening, as an example. And usually, ang problema kaya hindi nasasolve yung issue dyan sa road widening na yan, kasi ang tinitignan lang nilang numbers dyan, ilan yung kotse sa kalsada. Pero, sa lahat ng metrics na meron tayo, whether DPWH man yan o kung saan, never nila tinitignan ilan ba yung nakasakay dun sa mga sasakyan. Yeah. Hindi ba yun yung mas tama? Kaya nagkakagulo tayo sa anong solution ba yung tama, naglalagay tayo ng 10 skyway, hindi pa rin nare-resolve yung problem because we're actually not sure hindi natin mabigyan ng evidence kung ano ba yung nagkakos talaga ng issue. It's just puro anecdotal lang siya essentially. And we're trying to bridge that gap para hindi tayo nagsasayang ng pera. And mas lalong hindi tayo nagsasayang ng oras sa traffic.
So I guess in practical terms, Dr. Gomari, how can LGUs use this data? So I understand public participation is very important here in CIRMO kasi nakakapag-report din yung mga citizens yung incidents, yung mga traffic violations. So once the LGU gets a hold of that, how will that then lead to better mobility planning within the city?
Kunwari, sa mga cities natin, ang lagi namin ni-recommend kasi sa LGUs, they always ask us for yung tangible, no, na pwede nila gawin ASAP. And we always mention walkability. That's something we don't have, unfortunately, on our public streets. And itong kunwari, yung binanggit yung kino-collect na data on the ground, pwede mag-report yung tao, tinuturuan din namin yung LGU staff paano i-collect yung data na to. Nakakatulong siya sa pag-prioritize kung saan dapat yung unahin. So sa mga lugar na, sobrang daming tao, so na-capture natin yung data dito sa malapit sa Pasig Palengke, dami naglalakad. Tapos nung may mga nagre-report ng problema sa walkability sa area, nakita natin, kulang pala ng tawiran, ang dami palang nag-illegal parking sa sidewalk. So yung mga information na yun, kahit pa isa-isa lang siya pumapasok, yung system namin na yung nag-a-analyze on, how does the prioritization work? And anong cost-benefit analysis for the city para makapag-budget sila for the next years. Kasi hindi naman unlimited yung budget natin. No? Yun yung problematic dahil nga hindi unlimited yung budget natin, there needs to be some prioritization sa mga gusto nating gawin. And all of these small reports na nakukuha, as small as, ito medyo, parang akyat baba tong lakaran dito. So yung information that we get from the mobile app, it helps the city plan faster and budget more wisely.
So kunyari ngayon, no, na obviously sobrang mahal ng presyo ng gasolina, umaaray na yung mga tsuper, pwede rin gamitin yung CIRMO actually para i-plan gaano kadaming units yung kailangan ba talaga ma-deploy at a certain time? Right now, we're talking about the service contracting program of the government. So magagamit din nila yun, no? For example, kahit sa EDSA carousel, ano yung peak times, mga ganon. Is that possible?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the use cases na ginagawa namin ngayon. We're doing it both for Pasig and Naga. Siyempre magkaiba yung context. No? Naga is a much smaller city compared to Pasig. Pero we're doing it. We're actually tinitignan natin ano ba yung problem natin sa supply, ano ba yung adjustments na pwede natin gawin para to maximize ano lang yung meron tayo, especially with the oil crisis, with the prices soaring high. Medyo pati public transport nagmamahal na eh. Yung mga pasahero na naaawa na lang sila, nag-aabot na lang sila na extra sa drivers. Pero in reality, hindi dapat pinoproblema ng pasahero yung ano ba yung pamasahe na kailangan bayaran. That's something that the government should lead. But of course, I mean, we're happy to help the government in this aspect. And yeah, that's something we're definitely looking at.
So based on the data you've gathered so far or the data that you've seen, what would you consider as a low-hanging fruits, Dr. Gumari? No? Yung mga madaling pwedeng gawin because as you mentioned, itong mga proyektong to could take years and the budget is quite limited. So meron bang mga madali ang solusyon based on what CIRMO has gathered?
I always start with walkability. Walkability yung isa sa pinaka-tangible na kaya talaga gawin ng bawat LGU na hindi kailangan maghintay ng approval for the national government. Although the DPWH right now is extremely supportive with initiatives to make the national roads more walkable and more bike-friendly. So I say walkability is the first thing. Yan yung lowest hanging fruit. And ito, libreng advice na to sa kahit sinong LGU yung makikinig dito. It's just look at your city centers. Tingnan nyo kung walkable ba yung city center, yung mga population area natin. Let's start from there and then, the results will speak for itself. And of course, hand in hand with walkability is always public transport. Kasi public transport is the backbone of our entire transport system. 90%, 70 to 90% depending on where you look at, nagpa-public transport eh. The vast majority sa atin, lahat tayo nagpa-public transport. Pero, so it's very clear na yung road spaces natin, hindi tayo kulang sa space. I think there is this misconception, kulang tayo sa space sa Metro Manila, ganyan. Ang problema na meron tayo, hindi tayo magaling mag-manage ng space. Hindi natin siya na-allocate ng tama, hindi natin siya na-allocate for the benefit of the majority. And in effect, kasi pag binibigay natin yung space na yun sa majority, mas lumalago yung economy natin. Ang CIRMO is very economy biased. And all of these, and as a byproduct of that, being very biased to the economy, mas nagiging mas maganda yung lakaran natin, nagiging mas livable yung mga area natin, nagiging mas walkable. Again, it's always about walkability. That's the first thing. And I hope in the next few years we can influence many LGUs around the country to take the lead.
Doc, let me take a leap here. I know kasi that a few cities have already adopted it, like Pasig, Quezon City, and Naga. But let me ask you about, for example, EDSA. Sorry, I have to ask that. Of course, you know that was going to come, di ba? Any recommendations off the top of your head as far as EDSA is concerned?
Actually, yung ginagawa naman ngayon sa EDSA, yung rehab, there is some improvements. Like, winiden yung sidewalk, I think yung bus carousel natin, gagawin ng permanent yung, gagawin na siyang BRT, bus rapid transit, na fully dedicated na. Right now kasi, if I'm not mistaken, mga 50%, 60% lang yung protected eh. Kaya ang dami pa rin sumisingit eh. I think the next step for EDSA is, we can give more space to our cyclists. Right? Kaya dati kasi yung ginawa nating bike lane, I mean, it was not safe at all, right? Tapos sasabihin natin walang nagbabike. How can people bike?
Sa EDSA, nasa gutter.
Nasa gutter lane nga. Yun yung tawag eh. Exactly, right?
Panghuli na lang, no, Dr. Cyrus, in case may nakikinig sa ating planner, actually, this could also go for mga head o CEO ng mga TNVS or whatever, ride-hailing apps. Magagamit nila yung data mo. How do they get in touch with you if they want to engage your services?
Oh, they can email me at cyrus@cirmo.com or just look up our CIRMO Facebook page. We're very active on Facebook, even more so that in comparison sa LinkedIn. Kasi yung ginagawa namin is more relevant for the public. Eh. Even on TikTok even, I'm sort of active. I should become more active on TikTok actually. Kasi yung strategy kasi dito is, of course, we do all of these technical stuff. Nobody understands ano yung technical stuff yung ginagawa namin. Pero magandang we get the message across to the people kung ano ba yung benefit sa kanila. Para somewhat makakuha din ng public support sa mga ginagawa natin. And this thing we do is, it's actually, even from a political perspective, for the LGUs we work with, it's also good for them. Kasi automatic na yung, parang halos nagiging automatic na yung recommendation, pero majority yun justified with the proper data sets that will improve the lives of their constituents in the area.
All right, data really is life now in 2026. Dr. Cyrus Gumari, maraming salamat. That was Dr. Cyrus Gumari, creator of CIRMO.
And in other news, First Philippine Holdings today deferred its annual shareholders meeting, which was scheduled for May 28. The reason? The ongoing legal dispute between members of the Lopez family over control of the group, which has been playing out very publicly for weeks. And at the center of that dispute are provisions in two major deals, provisions being referred to as a poison pill. But what exactly is a poison pill? As a refresher, in February this year, a majority of the board of Lopez Inc. voted to remove Federico Lopez, known as Piki, as president. The shock move was led by his own cousin, Eugenio Lopez III, also known as Gabby. Lopez Inc. is the private family holding company that controls one of the largest conglomerates in the Philippines. Piki obtained a court injunction blocking his removal, so he remains in his seat while the case gets resolved by a Mandaluyong court. Now, in corporate practice, a poison pill is a provision that makes it costly or difficult to remove existing management or ownership. The idea is that whoever tries to force a change will effectively swallow something painful in the process. Now, this dispute centers on two major transactions that First Gen, headed by Piki, entered into with Enrique Razon's Prime Infrastructure. Back in 2025, First Gen sold a 60% stake in its gas-fired power plants to Prime for 50 billion pesos. Separately, First Gen also invested 62 billion pesos to acquire a stake in Prime Infrastructure's hydropower projects, two pump storage facilities being developed in Rizal and Laguna. So if Piki is removed as CEO of First Gen, or if his designated team loses board control, Prime Infrastructure has the right to buy back First Gen stakes at a 25% discount.
Now let's take a closer look at how much will this cost the Lopezes. On the hydropower projects in Rizal and Laguna, the potential loss is 15.5 billion pesos. On the gas plants in Batangas, an additional 8 billion pesos. So the total exposure is 23.5 billion pesos. This week, it also emerged that BDO's 25 billion peso loan guarantees for the same hydropower deal carry a similar condition, meaning they also want Piki to stay on. Gabby's faction says the poison pill was not disclosed to the full board or to the stock exchange and constitute as self-dealing. First Gen says the clauses were requested by Razon himself and that disclosure rules for listed companies govern the timing of their release. Coming back to today, First Philippine Holdings has not announced a new date for the shareholders' meeting. Poison pills or change of control clauses of this kind are very uncommon in Philippine corporate practice. So whichever way the courts rule will very likely have a bearing on how such provisions are treated in future deals.
This is the big story on One News, and still ahead. Government setting a maximum limit on how much oil companies can raise their prices. The announcement comes on the eve of another big-time oil price rollback. More details when we come back. Please stay tuned. You're still watching the big story on One News. We are circling back to our top story, how to bring back to the Philippines former Congressman Zaldy Co. Let's get insights from international law professor and author Attorney Rodel Taton. Attorney Taton is also the Dean of the Graduate School of Law of the San Sebastian College Recoletos. Sir, Attorney, welcome to the big story. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Ed, Shawn, and Pauline, good evening.
Sir, big question for a lot of people is all this talk for the past so many months that Zaldy Co reportedly has a Portuguese passport. Of course, we don't know that for a fact. But if that is the case, how does that affect everything?
I think if we have to look at the actual scenario there, that if he has a passport in Portugal issued by the Portugal authorities, so why did he not show that in the border? Or even if he was only given the golden visa or a residency certificate, then or an ID, he can show that in the border. But why did he not show that? Even in the border, he can even show his Philippine passport, although he was, the passport was canceled.
Yes,
But
sir.
in the border, he can probably use that. But he has no documents as per the allegations and reports that we have heard. As to the holding of a passport of Portugal, I don't think that the factual circumstances would meet there. No, can be threaded on that side.
Not to mention it's also illegal kasi a sitting congressman cannot cannot be a dual citizen, right?
Yes, and at the same time, there is this concept in international law that if a person possesses two nationalities, for example, Portugal and the Philippines, the third state, like the Czech Republic, can treat him to only possess one nationality, that which is the nearest to him or where he is habitually connected with. For in his case, he is an official, a congressman in the Philippines, so definitely it would be the Philippines.
Okay, well, we do know, attorney, that there are a lot of loopholes, no, as to how to skirt that disclosure rule on two citizenships. But if we were to ask you your best guess based on how the circumstances have played out, do you think Zaldy Co actually possesses a Portuguese passport or just a visa, which then would be connected to his
passport.
Philippine passport? Yeah, which is canceled.
I may think that it is only visa, because if you follow the timelines that he is involved in from the time that he left the Philippines to go to the US and then stayed and then went to Europe and in Portugal, and even then there was even a statement and probably a point that he went to Scandinavian area, where I remember that in January he even executed a document, right? I think
Yes, sir.
to be submitted to the Supreme Court for his TRO. And where did he have this apostilled? No, I'm not sure, but the rumors I heard was that it was in Scandinavia, in Sweden, and so following few months after that, now he was caught in the border of Czech Republic and also in Germany. So I would suppose that it is only a visa connected to his own Philippine passport. Because I think in the statement earlier that I mentioned, if he had this golden visa from Portugal, it could be quite impossible also that he did not present that in the border if he was actually arrested or was caught in the border of Germany. Because we know that recently in European Union they were quite strict with the border patrol, and if he possesses an ID, a residence ID or a visa, then he could have presented that. Or maybe the circumstance is that his visa expired, so that can also be a possible scenario where he was held in the border for that reason.
So, attorney, what are the options here for the Philippine government to bring back former Congressman Zaldy Co? Some legal experts believe that diplomatic negotiations are the best way to go.
I would agree that diplomatic framework, that course could be followed, because if we look at the agreements here, we can follow that route so that it would be faster as compared to waiting for the deportation proceedings and the results of the deportation proceedings, which can be stalled by certain applications, for example, by asylum or whatsoever. But if we follow the transnational crime agreements or passage or arrangements with the Czech Republic, then maybe it could be faster, for repatriation purposes.
Well, sir, let me pursue that angle. I'm not, of course, I'm not familiar with Czech law, but what's the possibility, if at all, of Zaldy Co applying for asylum with the Czech Republic? How does that work?
He can always use that as a framework, just like Harry did. But I don't think that they have similar circumstances, because if you follow the Dublin rules there, he may have to apply asylum in the place or in the state where he was issued a visa on, right? So right now he is in Czech Republic, and in Czech Republic he can probably just make an application for asylum, saying that, hey, I'm being persecuted in the Philippines, and there is an unfounded fear because I am being persecuted for my political opinions. Following my timeline, I spoke in a video about the allegations of corruption in the Philippines against the current administration, and even I made an affidavit in relation to that. So that is why I'm being threatened and attacked by my own government. So I'm being persecuted. But if we look at another angle, the Philippine government, of course, would say, and I think it's also a well-known fact, that he is a high-profile subject here. So he is being prosecuted and not persecuted because of the crimes of a staff of malversation and graft, and the reason why he was issued a warrant of arrest for that matter. So, but he can probably use that just to delay the process, because the application for asylum can stall the deportation proceedings. In fact, it can probably suspend the proceedings. And when the period for asylum application and it will be denied, then the deportation proceedings can proceed its course. At the same time, there can be possible legal remedies that may be applied as well in both circumstances that could probably delay the entire process of his repatriation.
It has also been brought up, this United Nations cooperation against corruption. Would that take long if that were to come into play, and how would that play out, attorney?
I think there are many conventions that may be applied here. One is that involving Interpol, Interpol, or the International Criminal Police Organization, that is based on a treaty also, the Convention on Transnational Crimes, and also, as you said, Convention Against Corruption. But if we look at all this, it would sum up to the cooperation agreements that the Philippines may enter or may have entered with Czech Republic. So this is where we look at the beauty of international cooperation agreements.
Sir, let me dabble in the realm of the improbable naman. What's the possibility that he simply forgot his Portuguese passport in Portugal? But because, of course, when you're in the EU, normally I suppose they don't really check your passports when you cross from one EU country to another. What's the possibility that he forgot his passport or his travel documents in Portugal? And if that were the case, how would that affect his case if he does have a Portuguese passport?
If he forgot his Portuguese passport, or at least he has an ID to present that, to support that allegation, he could have presented an ID or other proofs of identity, at least, that he is a citizen of Portugal, but he did not. So if we have to be strict about it, and I mean, they're not usually doing that, but if it is your time, paswerte in Filipino, di ba? Kung swerte mo, or malas mo, dun lang yun.
But attorney, if you are caught traveling without the proper travel documents, does that automatically mean you will be detained? Because a Bicol Party List representative, Alfredo Garbin, has said that he spoke to a close relative of Zaldy Co, and reportedly they say that everything is okay. You also have former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque saying Zaldy Co was not arrested. Is there a possibility po ba na hindi naman po talaga siya na-detain sa Czech Republic?
it is probable, but it can happen that, for example, it took the Flixbus coming from Prague to Berlin, for example, and he was caught there in the border because lately, in the past 2 years, the European borders have been quite strict with the entry and exit. I mean, entry of people, for example. So it can be that he was allowed to wait, for example. And he was not allowed to board the Flixbus, but he was advised to wait there, and then upon verification, so his passport may come up as canceled. No, so it can be that they verified, or maybe one Google would be proving that he is actually wanted in the Philippines. So, which would really make a different scenario there.
Attorney, one thing has been boggling my mind, this issue with whether or not he actually has a Portuguese passport. He has been gone since the middle of last year. How hard would it be to just ring up, I don't know, the Portuguese embassy here and ask flat out whether or not he does have a Portuguese passport? Are there rules regarding like the secrecy of that?
I think if you remember, he is in the European Union, and all the immigration there, they have database access to the those who are possessing golden visa or citizens, so they can easily check it online, and they have data sharing arrangements within the European Union itself, so they can verify that. But it may appear that many tries would show that he may not have that, and I mean just for the sake of argument simply, but I would suppose that they can easily check that in the database of the immigration just in case if he had, but it may turn out that he do not possess any, or it can be that he had a an expired visa, or maybe his passport was really proven to be canceled when they tried it in the scanner or something.
Because we're so blind as to what really happened. We haven't even seen a photo of him, so we don't really, some people are doubting that he's even been captured. But because it is an immigration and documentation issue, is it possible that he was just really held on an immigration thing and that it did not, spill over to, his other issues, like the cases filed against him back here in the Philippines?
So it can be an instance that it is a simple non-possession of a document in the immigration border, and that there is a violation of immigration laws in Czech Republic, and so he must face the immigration case or the deportation case that will be filed against him there, and thus he may be detained before the immigration facility of Czech Republic. So that is one instance. But if ever, for example, he is just held for purposes of verification and all that, he can easily call for sure. He has telephone there, or the people with their passport can go there easily in one day and all that. But as we said, in European Union, they have database sharing, so they can really look into whether this person possesses the necessary documentation as a Portuguese citizen or a Filipino citizen, or the passports are canceled, or the visa has expired. Because remember that he left the Philippines sometime last year to go to the US, sometime July, August, and so it's like almost 9 months or more than 8 months, and the visa may not have a validity of more than 6 months, right?
Okay. International law professor and author, Attorney Rodel Taton. Maraming salamat po, Attorney Taton.
Meanwhile, here are the latest developments in the oil crisis. Iran has threatened retaliation after U.S. forces intercepted one of its ships. Iran says the vessel was not only blocked but also fired upon and seized in the Arabian Sea over the weekend. Tehran called the incident piracy and a violation of an existing ceasefire agreement. Following that incident, Iran once again shut down the Strait of Hormuz just hours after reopening it, raising fresh concerns over global oil supply.
And back here at home, Energy Secretary Sharon Garin says the government will set a maximum limit on how much oil companies can raise prices. It will also put a minimum level for price rollbacks. She said the declaration of a national energy emergency gives the DOE authority to direct operations of fuel firms. Now, this news comes before another round of oil price rollback this week. Tomorrow, gasoline prices will go down by 3 pesos and 41 centavos per liter, while diesel will be slashed by nearly 25 pesos a liter. Kerosene will also be cheaper by 2 pesos a liter. And meantime, the government's service contracting program for additional public utility vehicles and traditional jeepneys has officially kicked off today. Over 400 units have operated under the program on its first day. President Bongbong Marcos personally attended the program's implementation at the Araneta busport this morning, and he said the program will continue for as long as fuel prices remain high.
And transport group Piston says it will file a petition with the LTFRB seeking a 10 peso increase in the minimum jeepney fare. The group says the request is based on earlier fuel price spikes that reached around 170 pesos per liter, along with taxes adding about 25 pesos a liter, including excise tax and VAT. Despite oil prices easing, Piston says drivers and operators are still struggling to earn enough to support their families and to recoup their losses.
And in related news, BPI plans to tighten lending as the oil crisis brought about by the war in Iran drags on. But one of the country's largest banks is seeing strong growth in one area, loans to buy electric vehicles. Mobile journalist Amy Atienza has this report.
The Bank of the Philippine Islands, or BPI, says the Middle East conflict is pushing up fuel prices and squeezing Filipino consumers. And in turn, it will have to be more careful about who it lends money to and under what conditions. That's given the heightened economic uncertainty brought about by the oil crisis. In recent weeks, higher inflation has hurt consumer sentiment, with many Pinoys now cutting back on discretionary spending.
When the times go bad, certain people will not apply anymore because they know they won't be approved, and certain people will apply because they need it, right? So I guess the message is tightening credit standards is but natural in any banking operation when the economy goes south or gets a little worse.
But the crisis is also creating opportunities. The country's largest bank says that while some clients are putting off big purchases, demand for electric vehicles is surging, with BPI's EV loan portfolio already reaching 12 billion pesos as of the first quarter, up 18% from last December. Half of that is being driven by Chinese brand BYD. The official distributor of BYD in the Philippines is AC Motors, another Ayala company.
And the demand for EVs now is so high. In fact, that's what is propping up our auto loan book. The biggest driver of that would really be would be BYD. About 50% of EV financing is coming from BYD.
BPI also says it remains committed to supporting its customers through the crisis. It says it's ready to work with those who may have trouble repaying loans.
We welcome them to come to us and request for restructuring or repackaging of their loans.
For the first quarter of the year, which covers the period when the war started, BPI reported net income 16.9 billion pesos, a modest 1.7% increase from the previous year. This was driven by sustained loan expansion, wider net interest margins, and a stronger fee-based income. But operating expenses also jumped more than 15%. CEO TG Limcauco also said they expect the bad loans ratio to rise given the economic crunch, but in the end, they remain focused on growing their consumer base.
For us, it really is about doing more for the country, because our belief is that the more people who are brought into the financial world, the more financial inclusion becomes part and parcel of Filipino lives. That's better for the country, that's better for the economy, and that's better for the banking sector. So with that,
Kapatid Amy Atienza, we are One News.
And before we go, we bring you stories on air quality. The Bureau of Fire Protection is assisting Navotas in putting out a fire in a sanitary landfill. The blaze has brought toxic smoke to Metro Manila and nearby provinces. Based on satellite data from the Philippine Space Agency, smoke from the Navotas fire has already reached as far as Bataan since April 10 and contains high nitrogen dioxide levels. This gas can cause respiratory irritation to long-term environmental damage. Meantime, in Cebu City, the local government is looking at work-from-home arrangements due to the haze. Residents are encouraged to wear face masks while outdoors. Air quality index in Central Visayas is at 177, or very unhealthy from the normal level of 100. The haze started last week and was caused by localized pollution, smoke from vehicle and industrial emissions, consecutive fire incidents, and stagnant airflow.
What's happening?
Umabot all the way in Bataan. That's how extreme it is.
Extreme it
Yeah.
is. Pero actually, sobrang humid. Pag lumabas ka, parang wala talagang hangin, no?
The thing is, with the hot weather, dapat the pollution is clearing up.
But there's...
Because
But yes. But, I mean, it's also incredibly humid, which tends to trap, things in the moisture, right, in the air.
yeah, that's true.
Plus, there's also that fire from the landfill na...
Nabotas, diba?
Yeah.
Tagal ng susunog.
Pwede
Okay.
mo gamitin yung mga leftover masks
Yes.
from the pandemic. That's what I've been
I
using.
still have a lot. All right, and that's all the time we have tonight on The Big Story. Thank you so much for watching.
We are back here tomorrow at 8 p.m. We'll see you then.
Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time. Have a good evening.